The storm rolled down from the high peaks like a living beast, devouring the valley in a white roar of snow and wind. And somewhere in that vast wilderness, a woman stumbled through the drifts, clutching a small, silent bundle to her chest. Her name was Ilara, barefoot, rag-wrapped, a widow of the mining towns that had dried up and left her with nothing but debt and a child she'd carried through hunger and cold. Each step sank her deeper into the frozen world, her breath breaking in sobs, her tears freezing before they could fall. By the time she saw smoke curling from a lone cabin nestled at the tree line, she could barely feel her hands. She whispered a prayer and pressed forward. The cabin door opened before she reached it, light spilling out like mercy itself. A man stepped into the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, his face hidden behind a thick beard, and eyes that seemed carved from the same mountain he called home. He held a lantern that flickered against the storm, and when he saw her collapse at his feet, he dropped to one knee without a word. "Please," she rasped, her lips blue, clutching the small form closer. "Please, bury my child." For a heartbeat, neither moved. The man's jaw tightened, his breath clouding the air, and then he took the bundle from her, trembling arms with a reverence she had not expected. "Come inside," he said, his voice deep, steady. "We'll talk by the fire." She shook her head weakly. "No, he's gone. He's cold. Just bury him, please." But he lifted her anyway, his arms strong and sure, carrying both mother and child into the warm cabin lit by firelight and faith. Inside, the air smelled of pine smoke and soup left simmering. He laid the child on a blanket and covered it gently, then turned to the woman. "You're freezing," he said, wrapping her in his fur coat. "Rest first. No grave should be dug by a dying soul." She tried to speak, but her voice cracked like ice. "You don't understand," she whispered. "There's nothing left for me. Just promise me he'll rest here." The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he went to the hearth, stoked the flames, and stared into them as if searching for the words buried deep beneath years of silence. "You think God sent you here for a burial," he said finally. "Maybe he sent you here for a beginning." She looked at him with eyes hollowed by grief, not understanding, but the steadiness in his voice wrapped around her like warmth itself. For hours, the storm battered the walls, but inside, the fire burned, and so did something else, something unspoken. The man introduced himself as Thorn, a trapper who had lived alone since the avalanche took his family years ago. He spoke little, but every word felt like an anchor in the storm. When Ilara finally slept by the fire, clutching the blanket that held her child, Thorn sat watching. He saw her fingers twitch even in dreams, her lips moving in silent apology to a life too small to fight the cold. He could have hardened his heart, as he had done before, but instead he rose, stepped into the night, and began digging. Snow lashed his face. The lantern flickered low, but he dug until his hands bled, because sometimes a man buries not only a child but also his own ghosts. When he returned, dawn was breaking, soft and gray, and Elara was awake, sitting quietly by the fire, tears drying on her cheeks. "You did it," she said softly. "You buried him!" Thorn nodded, wiping frost from his beard. "Aye," he murmured, "but I didn't bury him alone. I buried the part of me that stopped believing people could find their way to my door." She looked at him, confused and moved all at once. "Why would you do this for me?" she asked. He met her gaze. "Because once, someone should have done it for me." In that cabin, in that moment, two souls broken by loss found something that neither expected: understanding. Over the days that followed, Elara grew stronger, helping Thorn with the firewood, the meals, the small chores that stitched their silence together. Sometimes she spoke of her child, his laugh, his tiny hands, the way he used to look at her as if she hung the moon. Thorn listened, and for the first time in years, his cabin echoed with more than the wind. When the thaw came, he built a small cross at the edge of the clearing, carved with care, not for sorrow but remembrance. Elara stood beside him as the snow melted around their boots, her eyes glistening. "Thank you," she whispered. "You gave him peace." Thorn looked out over the mountains. "Peace," he said quietly, "comes when you give love a place to rest." As they turned back to the cabin, the clouds broke, sunlight pouring over the white peaks like gold spilling from heaven. It touched their faces warm and clean, and for the first time in forever, Thorn felt something shift inside him, a light returning, where darkness had long dwelled. And when Elara took his hand, neither spoke, but both knew something had changed. She had come seeking a grave. What she found was a man who remembered how to live, and he who had long buried his heart found that perhaps God's answer was not in death, but in the quiet rebirth that follows it. As night fell again and the lantern burned between them, Thorn looked at her across the fire and said softly, "Maybe we were both buried once, but maybe now we can learn to rise." And there, in that lonely cabin surrounded by snow and silence, the mountain began to whisper again of mercy, of second chances, and of love that can grow even in the coldest places. If you felt this story touch your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of love, faith, and redemption that remind us all, light always returns, even after the longest winter.